Hello, this is Laura and welcome to the Learning Reading Hub. If you're looking for a literacy curriculum, this is the video for you because I know how extremely confusing it is looking for a Learn to Read program. First of all, you start to do your research and there are so many options. And they all say they're great, they are very effective, and they look great, right? Then you also bump into a lot of jargon. You know, lots of big words to define them, lots of labels to describe their approach to teaching reading. The explanations aren't always all that clear, and it's really difficult to figure out the real differences among all of these curriculums. That is why in today's video I'm going to try to summarize in very simple terms the main styles, the main, let's call them, categories to teaching reading you're going to find in literacy curriculums. For each of these categories, I'll give you a few examples of literacy curriculums that actually fall within that category. But of course there could be, and for sure there will be, many more curriculums than the examples I'm going to give you, because as I said before, and as I'm sure you already know, there are many options. Anyway, as I normally do with videos like this one, where I throw a lot of information at you, I will create a downloadable document with my notes, and I'll leave you a link to download it completely for free on the video description. Also, based on the information in this video, I'm planning to create an article when I have more time for the Learning Reading Hub blog. Whenever that's ready, the link will be on the video description as well. Anyway, there's a lot to cover today. Hope you're ready. If you are, please give this video a like, subscribe, and let's get started. Okay, first of all of the approaches that I'm going to talk about today have something in common, and that is that they use explicit synthetic phonics to teaching reading. If you have already started to do your research, I'm pretty sure that you've bumped into this term probably quite a few times. What does it mean? Okay, when you teach with synthetic phonics, you focus on the individual sounds of the language and teach the different ways in which these sounds can be represented. For instance, the individual sounds in the word cat are k, a, t, and in moon are m, u, n. Those individual sounds are called phonemes. In synthetic phonics, you go from the sounds, from the phonemes, and how we represent them, to the whole, the words. Children also learn explicitly the connections between the letters and sounds. In other words, they are going to learn with instructions from their teacher, that is you, that the letter A makes the A sound and the letter B makes the B sound, and so on and so forth. In preparation for reading, children are trained to identify and segment the individual sounds in words, and then they are trained to pull all of those sounds together or blend them or synthesize them. There are so many different names to say the same thing: to read words. This is different from other types of phonics, for instance, from analytic phonics. This is another way of teaching phonics, which I do not recommend, when you go from the whole, from the words, to the parts, the sounds, rather than the other way around. In analytic phonics, children are shown and sometimes even asked to memorize whole words, and it's all about analyzing the words and reaching your own conclusions about how the code works. For instance, children could be presented with the words moon, mat, mice, man, and then the teacher would read the words out loud for them, or maybe they have pictures next to the words so they can actually figure out what those words mean, or maybe they had been asked to memorize those words previously, because as I said, reading starts before sound letter connections have been taught, and then the teacher would ask the students, okay, what do you notice here? What is going on here? What do you think is going on here? And the idea is for them to learn to notice that all of these words start with the letter M, therefore the letter M must represent the sound. And even if they do come to certain conclusions around letters and sounds, it's very unlikely that they'll be able to figure out all of the twists and turns of the English spelling system, which is extremely complex. Anyway, that's a short explanation for synthetic phonics. I hope it's clear enough. Now that we have defined it and it's out of the way, let's go through the different categories you can find within the synthetic phonics world. First of all, we have curriculums that follow the Orton-Gillingham approach to teaching reading. The Orton-Gillingham approach to teaching reading is extremely popular in literacy curriculums these days. Some people even consider this type of curriculum sort of the gold standard for teaching phonics. Why? Well, it is explicit, structured, and extremely gradual in the introduction of concepts. Orton-Gillingham curriculums don't assume that children will figure things out all by themselves. They explicitly explain the rules, and they tend to use a very carefully designed, a very strategic scope and sequence, introducing lots of opportunities for review along the way to consolidate learning. Also, they don't usually allow students to move on to the next concept, onto the next rule, until it's pretty clear and obvious that they've learned, that they've mastered the previous one. So in that regard, this system ticks all the boxes of what works and has been proven to be more effective. But I think the popularity of the Orton-Gillingham approach really comes from pairing all of these with the multisensory approach for a more holistic learning experience. To be honest, this is probably what the Orton-Gillingham approach is really well known for. Many children seem to learn a lot through kinetic, multisensory experiences, and I think this is what attracts many parents to this type of curriculums. Also, this seems to work very well for children with dyslexia, struggling readers, and other learning differences. A few examples of curriculums that follow the Orton-Gillingham approach to teaching reading are, by the way, I'm not gonna extend on each one of them, I'm just gonna name them because I don't want to make this video extremely long, and because actually for most of them I have other videos on the channel where I walk you through them. There are also articles on the Learning Reading Hub blog if you prefer to read, even though I guess if you're here you prefer to watch videos. I don't know, in any case, there are there for you as well. So if you're a little bit like me, sometimes I prefer to watch videos, sometimes I prefer to read. Anyway, let's go through the list. All about reading, all about spelling, logic of English, reading horizons, explode the code, pride. As I said before, these are not the only ones, only a few examples of trusted, good quality Orton-Gillingham curriculums. And by the way, remember that you don't have to take notes, don't worry, you'll have the download my notes document on the video description, so you can relax and enjoy the video. A side note as well, when I said before that they are considered the gold standard, that doesn't mean that they are the best option you've got. Many people like them and achieve great results with them, and that's why they've become so popular. However, there are other approaches to teaching reading that can deliver good results as well, so let's go through them. The second category of literacy curriculums that we're going to see today are direct instruction curriculums. The direct instruction model to teaching reading emphasizes clear instructions, carefully planned lessons, very gradual learning, and the use of a script to avoid any sort of misinterpretations. It all revolves around giving instructions and giving the right instructions. Even mistakes have to be corrected in a very particular way. These curriculums also try to move students to mastery as fast as possible for their abilities. Probably the most popular curriculum that follows the direct instruction model to teaching reading is Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons. I'm not sure at what point exactly you are with your research into literacy curriculums, but I bet you've heard at least of this one. It is extremely popular and the flagship of the direct instruction model to teaching reading. In fact, one of the co-authors of this program, Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons, Siegfried Engelmann, was also one of the original creators of the direct instruction method. However, it's not the only curriculum you've got, it's not your only option, and I will give you a couple more examples later on. But before, I wanted to tell you more about the results of the direct instruction model, and the criticism it sometimes receives. So regarding results, very positive results in general, and these programs are developed with a lot of field testing, so good. I will leave you a couple of extra links on the video description for you to check out if you want to find out more about this, about the story behind the direct instruction model, about the project follow through. It's very interesting, but we don't have time to talk about this today in this video, maybe another day. Regarding the criticism, you also need to know that the direct instruction model is not everyone's cup of tea. Some people find it strict or rigid because you really need to follow a script and stick to the instructions to a T. Anyway, curriculums that follow the direct instruction model, apart from teach your child to read in 100 easy lessons for at-home use, are Phonics. This is a computer-based homeschool reading program based on programs that were created by Orton-Gillingham, remember, the creator of the direct instruction model, and his son Owen. I think it was first released as a series of DVDs in the 90s. Anyway, no DVDs these days, it's all been transformed into a web-based app. Then you have reading.com. This is another great app that follows the direct instruction model for teaching reading. It's very complete, very well designed and executed, and you can use it as your literacy curriculum. If you want to know more about this app, you can check this video over here, and don't worry, I'll also leave you a link on the video description so you can continue to watch this video and watch that one later on if interested. I'll give you 2 more options, but please bear in mind that these are intervention programs and they were created more for the classroom than for at-home use. Anyway, the names are Corrective Reading and Reading Mastery Transformation. Okay, moving on, third category. Phonics Primers. This is what I call the no-frills approach. So what is a primer? Well, probably it's the oldest method there is to teaching reading. Primers have been used for centuries. However, they've changed slightly along the way. For instance, these are images I found on the Smithsonian Institution's website of the New England Primer. This was the first reading primer designed in the American colonies, and it is one of the most successful textbooks of the 18th century. And it not only taught reading, it also taught morality through stories. If you're curious to check it out, I'll also leave you a link on the Download My Notes document. Anyway, fast forward to the 21st century, you can still find phonics primers. These primers introduce the basic principles of phonics, basically through word lists ordered by difficulty level. This method of teaching reading involves a lot of drilling as you move on from simple words, for instance, 2-letter words or CVC words, to words of increasing difficulty. I'll show you now an example of a phonics primer I have. It's called Alpha Phonics. It's quite popular as well, so again, if you've already started to research into literacy curriculums, it's quite likely that you've bumped into it. Okay, so as you can see, list of words, lists and lists of words, and more lists of words, black and white, drill, 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 practice, practice, practice. I know it's not very sexy, very old school, but do not underestimate the power of this method. These lists have a lot of thought put into them, so if they have been crafted properly, they can be all you need. Besides, these primers, at least Alpha Phonics, will come with a little manual with instructions, suggestions, lesson plans, etc. But it's never going to get overcomplicated. The secret behind these primers is the drilling, the practice, and how these word lists have been crafted. This is probably the most basic approach to teaching reading that you can choose, but sometimes simple is good, right? Even though this is not the system that I've personally used with my daughters to teach them to read in English, I've used something pretty similar to these English phonics primers with my older daughter to teach her to read in Spanish. I use what is called a silabario. I guess the translation would be syllabarian, and it's basically the same concept, but you teach at the syllable level. So for instance, M and A, ma, M and E, me, M and I, me, M and O, mo, M and U, mu. And then drill, 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 practice, practice, practice with lots of words with ma, me, mi, mo, mu in them. But my point here was I've used something pretty similar for Spanish, and while it's boring, my daughter certainly didn't like it. It was very effective for us. Anyway, coming back to English phonics primers, you normally start to use them once your child knows the alphabet. So you need to teach the letters first. Curriculums, so apart from alpha phonics, we've already seen this one. Another primer that I've heard good things of is called the Natural Phonics Primer, but I must admit, I haven't seen it, I do not have it. Okay, moving on, next category, the Montessori way to teaching reading. I was not going to talk about this one today, but I've had quite a few people asking me about Montessori lately and how they go about reading, so I thought it was worth mentioning because maybe this is something that you're considering too. However, please bear in mind that I'm not an expert on the Montessori system. Okay, Montessori uses systematic, synthetic phonics for teaching reading as well, but there are a few peculiarities. Number one, it teaches writing before reading or how to decode. This approach is considered organic because, according to Montessori, the ability to write comes first and more naturally than the ability to blend sounds or read words. Number two, there don't seem to be Montessori literacy curriculums as such. Please correct me if I'm wrong here, but what I see you have, if you want to follow this route, is more like courses that introduce you to the Montessori system and give you recommendations, so you can create your own homeschooling curriculum specific to your child's needs. Of course, you also have Montessori guides and books, and of course Montessori materials that have been specifically created for teaching reading. And in that regard, there are three key materials that Maria Montessori relied on for teaching reading, and these are the materials that you're going to use as well if you want to teach your child to read the Montessori way. Number one is sound objects for phonemic awareness. Number two are sandpaper letters for connecting sounds to the letter symbols. They look like this and allow your child swipe his or her fingers along the form of the letters. The third material is a movable alphabet for writing full words before children master how to write with a pen. Lots of options here to get these materials on Amazon, on specific Montessori shops. For instance, the products you've seen are either from Amazon or from a shop called Montessori Services that seems to have everything you need in the Montessori space. Anyway, don't worry, I know it's a lot of information again. Remember, I'll leave you links on the video description and that you can download my notes as well. And finally, the last peculiarity of the Montessori system that I wanted to share with you today, and pay attention because it's pretty important. These materials were all Maria Montessori needed to teach reading, but the system she developed was to teach how to read Italian. The Italian phonetic code is way simpler than the English one. In fact, I've even heard that it is the easiest language when it comes to learning to read. Children can learn in a few months. And if you do not believe me, I read it in a book by an eminent researcher. The book is called Reading in the Brain. For me, actually, it makes sense because Italian is very regular, very transparent. Every letter represents only one sound. Sounds are represented always in the same way. So Maria's original reading program, while probably very good for the initial stages of learning to read, I can see that and I do not doubt it, is probably not going to be enough for dealing with all the complexities of the English spelling system. In fact, apparently his son Mario Montessori said, "Dr. Montessori did not know the English language. It was left to the ingenuity of Montessori-trained people to find a solution." So the English-speaking world had to find a solution to fill the gaps. Most of the solutions I think that are used right now were proposed by a teacher called Muriel Dwyer. This system is explained on the book A Path for the Exploration of Any Language Leading to Writing and Reading, which probably would be your go-to guide for teaching reading in English according to Montessori principles. Honestly, I haven't read it. I wanted to. It's only 40 pages long, but I couldn't find a place where to buy it locally here in Australia. It's not on Amazon, it's not on major bookstores. You cannot get it as an ebook. I found a website in the US, but the shipment was like $50, so too much to pay for a shipment. However, if you're in the US or in the UK, way easier, you have options. Anyway, what I've seen is that for the next stages of learning to read, apart from the materials I've mentioned before, there are others. All of these materials will allow you to go ahead and execute Montessori activities and games for learning to read. Moving on to the next group of literacy curriculums now, you have the ones that do not have any further labels added to them, apart from being obviously systematic, explicit, synthetic phonics programs. Do these make them worse? The fact that they do not have any more fancy names added to them? Of course not. Okay, there are so many here. So what I'm going to do is naming a few of them that are really popular, and I'm going to share with you a couple of highlights about them. I will not extend a long time on each one of them. For many of them, if interested, there are other videos on the channel you can watch where I walk you through them. Besides, I've been talking for a long time already, haven't I? If you're still listening, well done. Thank you so much. Anyway, these are the curriculums. Children Learning Reading. This program was designed to teach even really young children to read. I believe that is why the initial lessons are really short, very digestible for really young learners. It focuses a lot on the development of phonemic awareness, which is great, as we have already seen. It does a good job with the foundational skills and is not complicated to implement at all. I actually used this program to reinforce what my older daughter was learning at school, and it's a good program. Repetitive, maybe not fancy, but my daughter and I learned a lot with this program, and it worked for us. But bear this in mind, my daughter was already 5 and she knew the basics of literacy. She was learning at school mainly through sight words. That was inefficient and confusing. Besides, suddenly we were in lockdown, homeschooling. But anyway, it's a story for another day. Let's move on to the next curriculum. Hooked on Phonics. The main highlight of this curriculum, I think, is its simplicity. There's a very clear routine that goes more or less the same way every single day. Very simple for your child, very simple for you. It also uses lots of audiovisual elements. You also have the possibility of getting the Hooked on Phonics app that goes alongside the curriculum nicely. It matches the same scope and sequence the curriculum has. Another highlight is that it is aligned with Common Core standards. This might actually be something important for you if you're homeschooling in the US. Moving on, Phonics Pathways. This is what I call the successive blending curriculum, a very good curriculum for children that after trying every possible strategy for blending sounds still struggle with this. I won't go into any more detail here in this video today because if interested, there's an entire video on the channel talking about it. Finally, the last approach that we're going to talk about today is create your own homeschooling curriculum. There are just so many affordable materials you can get from different places, for instance TPT, or even from the Learning Reading Hub website, where we have lots of freebies and even a few paid materials as well. It's complex though, because there's a lot of hard work involved. You have to educate yourself. It's difficult to put all of these pieces together, but if you have the drive and the time, It can be exciting too. If that's the route you're interested in, I suggest you download this guide, How to Teach a Child to Read from Scratch, step by step. You can download it for free at the time of recording. The link will be on the video description. Or if you prefer to have it on Kindle format, it's only 99 cents. I think it could be a really good starting point for you. It's a quick read, but it summarizes very clearly, in my humble opinion, how to go about teaching reading with synthetic phonics. It gives you a clear step-by-step roadmap, and there's no fluff. It's just very practical, very much to the point. And from there, you can see what materials you need, how to prepare your lessons, what plan you're gonna follow, etc. Okay, so that's it for today. Remember, on the video description, you will find the link to the Download My Notes document. And if the article I'm planning to publish on the Learning Reading Hub blog based on all of this information is available at the time you're watching this video, you'll also find the link on the video description. Thanks so much for watching. I hope this was useful. I wish you lots of success teaching your child to read or your children to read. And if you're interested in more videos about phonics, learn to read tools, and well, literacy in general, subscribe. Bye and see you on the next video.